Looking around the room this morning, I just have to say that I'm exceedingly flattered and honored by the faces that I'm looking at. When your competitors and your colleagues join you in an event like this, I think it's the highest form of flattery. We have some very notable company owners here today, some very prestigious agents, a lot of very prominent people in the community, and to all of you, my heartfelt welcome and my desire to look back and join the lectures that run through the balance of the year 2012. You are all more than welcome. I believe there's really no such thing as a great company, but there are great people. And I'm looking at a lot of great faces, and again, I sincerely thank you. In 1962, President Kennedy hosted a reception in the East Room of the White House for all the then living American Nobel Peace Prize recipients. And his comment was that it was very well conceivably the greatest group of talent within four walls since Thomas Jefferson dined alone. And I would tell you that I echoed President Kennedy's remarks today. I think within these four walls, we have some of the greatest talent within our industry. I am extremely optimistic this morning. I'm only going to talk for 1 second. And for those of you that work for me, you're all going, oh, thank God. Can't go on forever. I'm extremely optimistic about the year 2012 for our industry. We had job creation in December of 350,000 jobs. The 3 automotive makers, U.S. Detroit-based, showed profits for the month of December. And there was a mood beginning to come forth in America, but I think it's a better place than we've been when we gathered here together, gosh, 8, 9 months ago, Brett, whatever it was, for our first meeting. So we look forward to a great 12. We're going to open a few more offices, begin a few more divisions. And I'm excited about the year that lies ahead. Very excited. Of the tools that we've been fortunate enough to create within what we call JAG, it took me 2 years to realize that my agents were talking about John Arrow Group and not my car, but I'm slow to catch on, so I finally did. The tools that we have that we've created, I think none is really more exciting and beneficial to our industry and to our community and to our clients and to all of our friends than our Arrow architectural. It has brought a tremendous amount of resource and knowledge to a lot of people who are craving it and wanting it. And for that, all of the thanks goes to one man, and that is my good friend and the founder of Arrow Architectural, and a gentleman who has just executed a 99-year employment agreement with me. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, Brett Parsons.
Unexpected.
You think I'm kidding too, by the way.
The 99-year part's right. I got the papers. Okay, before we begin, and I'm grinning because I know what you're going to be seeing in just a moment, and you're going to just love it. I saw it last Tuesday night. Before we dive right in, a couple of housekeeping items. If you parked at PDC, make sure that you have your ticket with you, and when you exit, say John Arrow Lecture, and then you're limited to a $10 charge. Please turn off your cell phones. Handle that, please. Next month, same bat time, same bat location here in the room. Michael Gross, who wrote Unreal Estate, will be speaking. That's February 13th. Remember, one day before Valentine's Day. And as a special treat, he's being introduced by the 1 million hit per month blogster, The Real Stalker. And he will be unveiling himself, which he has never done before, so you're in for a little treat. He'll tell you why he's doing that next month. Immediately following the program, our speaker, Stephen, he'll be available for a few questions and answers up here in front, so if you'd like to visit with him, just come right up here in the middle, and he'll be glad to help you out. I am very happy, honored, and excited. I get to introduce Stephen Price. Growing up in Brentwood and Malibu during the 1960s and 70s, Stephen was happily exposed to homes by John Lautner, Craig Elwood, Frank Lloyd Wright Sr. and Jr., and many other notable designers. And these homes are now often termed mid-century modern. From 9 to 5, Stephen's vocation is in film and television. However, his avocation is strictly design and architecture. So we're all among friends this morning. He's a lecturer, historian, and popular commentator in print and blogs. Stephen wears an additional hat as director of the Harold Levitt Professional Archive, which will mean much more to you during his presentation this morning. His forthcoming book, Over the Top, The Architectural History of Trousdale Estates, focuses on the neighborhood he considers his childhood architectural crush and one that he has never gotten over. And it's sweet. You're in for an absolute treat, and you'll understand why by the end of the program this morning. You're in for a treat because authors rarely present prior to the publication of their books. And it's obvious that he's doing this as a huge favor to everyone here this morning. So thank you, Stephen, in advance. So, yeah. This is a rarity. So consider yourself a lucky recipient as you witness the symbolic and ubiquitous double doors of Truesdale unlocked and opened up for the very first time by author and social raconteur Stephen Price.
I'm a bit of a shouter. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Let's move this back.
You're perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Brett. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. What better way to celebrate Martin Luther King Day, honoring the great pioneer of civil rights, than by discussing the houses of rich people, right? 1967, Valley of the Dolls. When Hollywood wanted to show Hollywood at its worst, of course, Neely O'Hara had to have one of those houses.
Dad? Honey, it's me.
Well, let's stop for a little dinner.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, relax, baby. This house is so full of hills and booze. The sun is just they couldn't run there.
Having fun, kiddies? Don't mind me, go right ahead. I'll watch. You better run, you little tramp. I think that ain't my pool. Here, maybe this will disinfect it.
Everyone has an opinion about Trousdale Estates. Glamorous, vulgar, ultimate LA dream, nouveau riche nightmare. It's always been that way. Now that said, a lot of people are surprised to hear the words Truesdale and architecture in the same sentence. From the beginning, it was famous for its celebrity residence and the flamboyant, some might say over-the-top, quality of its houses. What's not known, even to architectural scholars very widely, is that Trousdale Estates has LA's largest concentration of residential work by most of its A-list architects of the 1950s and 60s. Paul Williams, Cliff May, Richard Dorman, Wallace Neff, Harold Levitt, Lloyd Wright, and many, many, many more. The appeal of Trousdale Estates from the start lay in its flat-out abundance, epitomizing a golden place in the national psyche, the last era in U.S. history where we as a nation were rushing in confidence towards a future where everything was always bigger, brighter, and better. California was at the forefront of this post-war good life. It was shown in magazines around the world. And of course, if everything was bigger and better in California, it was absolutely outsized in Beverly Hills. And just as many icons of that exuberant era, Martinis, to Mad Men, to the Rat Pack, and Frank and Dean were Truesdale residents, have been rediscovered, Trousdale Estates is back, and it's bigger than ever. But first things first. Some of you may be asking, where is Trousdale Estates? It's in the city of Beverly Hills, shown in pink on the map here. It's here in the northeast corner on the site of the old Doheny Ranch. In other words, the 410-acre parcel, this tract of 535 homes, was basically created from the backyard of Greystone Mansion. For those who don't know where Greystone is, it's a little to the west of Sunset and Doheny. Oilman Edward L. Doheny was once the richest man in America, having made his fortune by drilling in the western United States and especially in Mexico. He was a controversial figure, as all robber barons are. He was implicated in the Teapot Dome scandal of 1923, where bribes were found to have been paid to U.S. government officials in exchange for lucrative drilling rights in Wyoming. The supposed bad man who handled delivery of the bribes was his only son, Edward L. Doheny Jr., known as Ned. The scandal was epic, and business matters were made worse by the move on the part of the Mexican government to nationalize the Doheny oil operations there. Meanwhile, here at home, Doheny Sr. doted on his son Ned, and for his wedding present, built him the grandest home in Los Angeles. Greystone Mansion, at 46,000 square feet, is still Beverly Hills' largest residence. It was designed by Gordon Hoffman in 1926 and completed in 1928 at a cost of a reported $3.1 million, which in today's dollars would be about $38 million. And that's just the house. That's not even including the 410 acres. I can't imagine what those would cost today. The interiors were sumptuously appointed. Here's a view of the main drawing room during the Doheny residency. Ned and Lucy Doheny moved in with their 5 children at Greystone in 1928, but Ned's life there was cut short by a scandalous murder-suicide at the hands of his male secretary, Theodore Hugh Plunkett, just 6 months later, on February 16, 1929. Speculation about how it really transpired has been ongoing ever since, with some taking the view that Ned was having an affair with Hugh and was on the verge of calling it off, causing Plunkett to kill his erstwhile lover and then himself. But I subscribe more to the theory that Hugh was about to be asked to take the fall for Ned's bribery charges and realized that he would spend the rest of his life in jail after serving the Doheny family so faithfully, and that it was that realization, coupled with his apparent history of, shall we say, mental instability, which led to the fateful act. Anyway, it happened behind locked doors. The doctors arrived and apparently moved the bodies before the police got there, and it's always been a scandalous mystery. Ned's widow, Lucy, remarried and continued to live at Greystone with her new husband until 1955, when she decided it was just too big and moved to a more modest home she had built next door. The Knoll, as it is known, was designed in a refined Georgian style by architect Roland Coate and came in at a much more manageable and intimate 32,000 square feet. Interesting architectural side note. While working on the Hollyhock House for Aileen Barnstall in Hollywood in about 1920, long before Greystone was built, Frank Lloyd Wright appears to have come up with a plan for what he called the Doheny Ranch Resort, whose hills would have been dotted with the concrete textile block houses he was designing at the time. Imagine if instead of the Truesdale we know today, these hills had been dotted with versions of the Ennis House, the La Miniatura, the Freeman and Storer houses, along with decorative bridges and retaining walls. A topographical model made for a national exhibition in 2006 clearly shows Wright's designs for what later became Carla Ridge on the left, Wallace Ridge in the center, and Upper Hillcrest on the right. Now, there's no evidence that Wright ever met Ned Doheny, so this project was done entirely on spec. Still, it's a fascinating architectural what-if. So here we are in 1954. Before decamping to the Knoll, Lucy Doheny, long ago having become Mrs. Lee Batson, sells the 410 acres above Greystone to developer Paul Truesdale, who announces that his plans to create custom home sites on the parcel. You can see Greystone at the bottom left is still there. Who is Paul Truesdale? He was in fact one of the most prolific builders and developers of post-war California, with housing subdivisions, retail projects, and business ventures all over the western U.S. and as far away as Hawaii. He's seen here with his first wife, Mary, and their daughters, Mary Ellen and Marguerite. As the display ad, oops, I forgot the slide. There we go. As the display ad shows, his California projects alone range from Palm Springs Tockwitz River Estates and Deep Well Ranch to Westdale in Los Angeles, housing developments out in Northridge and Sherman Oaks, and as far up north as Millbrae, the former Mills Estate, and Marin County Country Club in Marin County. Trousdale Estates was something of a departure for Paul Truesdale. Certainly it's his crowning achievement. Truesdale Construction tended to build modest homes, but by the thousands. At one point, he was the Bank of America's largest construction borrower for several years in the late 40s. He also built subdivisions known as Joe Louis homes, hiring the former heavyweight champion to be the front man and offering value-based homes to people of color who were often restricted from owning real estate in wide swaths of the country until the 1960s. He built the Los Angeles Forum for Jack Kent Cooke in 1967. One of my favorite stories told to me by Ron Lorange, who was president of the Truesdale Corporations from 1958 to 72, was that Jack Kent Cooke had been awarded the LA Kings hockey expansion franchise, but he was going to lose it if he didn't have a place for them to play the next season. The LA Sports Arena was spoken for by the rival bidder, Rams owner Dan Reeves at the time. With only days to go and the clock ticking, Cooke and Truesdale happened to be on a plane with each other, seated next to each other on a flight back from New York, and got to talking. When they landed, Truesdale drove Cooke in his car to a parcel of land he owned in Inglewood opposite Hollywood Park. Paul Truesdale offered right then and there to build Jack Kent Cooke the facility he needed. The two men shook hands on the deal, and the next day, Cooke announced to the world the Kings and the Lakers would play in a brand new facility the next year, and the rest is history. As I said, Paul Truesdale's activities were far-flung. He built the tower addition to the Moana Surf Rider in Waikiki Beach in Honolulu and the International Marketplace directly across the street to be the flagship location of his friend Don Gant's restaurant, better known as Don the Beachcomber. It was at that restaurant sometime around 1968 that a young singer went on one night in the bar lounge to replace a musician who thought the Beachcomber wasn't paying him enough. That young singer's name was Don Ho, and again, the rest is history. One of Truesdale's many business undertakings was development of memorial parks. Get it? Business undertakings, memorial parks. His most ambitious is the Valley of the Temples, an interfaith memorial park on the windward side of Oahu, whose most striking feature is the reconstruction of the 900-year-old temple at Byodo-in, which was built in Japan, taken down, and reassembled at its site here in 1968 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the first Japanese immigration to Hawaii. There is a plaque at the temple entrance honoring Paul Truesdale and his gift to the people of Japan and Hawaii. Though he built modest homes, Paul Truesdale himself lived quite well in two homes. This one designed by architect Alan Seipel in Brentwood, a few blocks from where I grew up, and the other, also designed by Alan Seipel, in the exclusive and restrictive Smoke Tree Ranch in Palm Springs. Let's just say I doubt there are many mezuzahs on the doors at Smoke Tree. Anyway, back to Trousdale Estates. Here we are in 1955. Paul Truesdale has successfully lobbied the city of Beverly Hills to expand its borders to include his new development. The grading has begun on its eastern side. In fact, the whole operation by engineering firm Hope and Headland and Darby was an engineering marvel. It forever influenced the way hillside development was done in Los Angeles, if not all California. The street names are a fun piece of the story. Carla Ridge was named for a girlfriend of Paul's best friend, Don the Beachcomber. Dabney Lane and Clinton Place were named for John Dabney Murkison and Clint Murkison, the Texas millionaires who founded Centex Construction, owned the Dallas Cowboys, and who invested heavily with Truesdale. The Vic in Vic Place was Gene Truesdale's maiden name. Martin Lane for Paul's great friend Dan Martin of Martin Cadillac. Even Chalette Drive was named for one of Gene Truesdale's long-suffering poodles. Truesdale Estates from the air about a year later, showing just how ambitious a project it was, and the project would eventually continue further back to the ridge at the top, the crest of the hills you see with the San Fernando Valley beyond. Upper Loma Vista Drive and Truesdale Place on the right, they're still grading Carla Ridge up at the top. And here's a shot I'd say was taken about 1960, taken from the lot where Danny Thomas's former house now stands. at the end of Hillcrest Road. Note the house at the top center, the Cy Ramo house. That's the house Jeffrey Katzenberg bought in 2009 for $35 million, tore down, and is building an 11,000 square foot new house on his site. We'll talk about that later. Before we move on, I do want to thank Mark Wanamaker and the Bison Archive for providing me access to these fantastic historical images. There were many styles of houses in early Trousdale Estates. One of the most popular was the Tropic Modern, or as my friend humorist Charles Phoenix calls it, Pineapple Plantation. I know. Tiki was big in the 50s, all over the country, and the house shown here, longtime home of comedian Maury Amsterdam, has been a landmark in this style since it was built in 1958. I know many of you saw this when the house went up for sale a year and a half ago. It's exactly the same inside as when Maury was there. Another popular style is Hollywood Regency, with limited fenestration on the facades, tall entry doors, and theatrical exterior decorations. This one was the longtime home of Nancy Sinatra. And don't forget the mansard roofs. Straightforward modern was everywhere, a lot of it in a style I call Mise Van Deluxe. Barcelona Pavilion's Beverly Hills style. Like this wonderful house by Howard Frank, Paul Williams' former head draftsman, who left Williams' office in 1951 and branched out on his own. Some of the moderns were curvaceous and mysterious, like this one by Hal Levitt, built in 1963. You can also see why, when Persian families began to arrive in Beverly Hills in the 1970s, they were drawn to Trousdale Estates. Its topography and architecture reminded them very much of the modern mansions they left behind in the hillsides of Tehran. Of course, that was before the European mongrel model became the choice for the rich of all backgrounds in Beverly Hills. By far, the most popular and recognizable style in Trousdale Estates is the Grecian or Roman modern. Whenever someone talks about something being in the Truesdale style, they usually have something like this in mind. And that's if they like it. If they don't like it, they call it early Caesar's Palace. This all takes place behind gates designed by Paul Truesdale's longtime associate, Alan Seipel, who we saw had designed Truesdale's own two homes, and who tried to give the brand new subdivision a modicum of respectability. He also designed two of Truesdale's most famous houses, one for Dinah Shore on Drury Lane, and the infamous residence for Richard Nixon on Martin Lane, both of which are now gone. Snob appeal was first and foremost the sales angle in selling Trousdale Estates. Each home was a custom home to be a minimum of 3,000 square feet, at a time when the size of the average American home was 1,250 square feet. Ads like this in Architectural Digest showed modern-day palaces with princely price tags to match, starting at $250,000. At one point in the mid-60s, sales were a little slow as they finished up the grading on the western ridges. So a new marketing campaign was launched. 10 model homes were planned. There were to be 2 each by architects Rex Laudery, William Stevenson, Edward Fickett, Richard Dorman, and Quincy Jones. In the end, however, only 5 were built. We'll see some of those in a little while. Architectural Digest was without question the most important publication promoting the advent of Trousdale Estates. Being based in Los Angeles helped, because it's doubtful that an East Coast publication would have featured 2 or 3 Trousdale houses in every issue. The earliest feature I can find is this house by James Doheny, more famous for his classic neo-Georgian mansions like the former Conrad Hilton estate in Bel Air. You can already see some of the design features that would become Trousdale classics: the windowless front, adorned with statuary, the carport, a large motor court. When I started researching the book, given the tear-down happy nature of Trousdale over the past 20 years, I didn't even bother looking to see if this one was still around. I was sure it was long gone. But, to my happy surprise, a sharp-eyed source pointed out where I could find the house today, less most of the decorative filigree. For all its supposed celebrity stardust, Trousdale has always housed an equally high concentration of fascinating entrepreneurs and tycoons across all industries. J.C. Garrett was one of them, a one-time riveter from the Badlands of Texarkana, who you could say literally built his company out of thin air, pioneering aircraft pressurization and expanding his aeronautics innovations to eventually include the oxygen gear for the Mercury astronauts. His success afforded him this splendid home by Cliff May. And this is where it gets interesting, because this same house has been claimed by the archive of Paul Williams. I've visited the May archives at UCSB. I've seen the renderings and the versions of the floor plans. They'll be in the book. I don't know where actually Williams might have been connected. The current owner bought the house from the Garrett estate in 1969 and never called Paul Williams in to do any work. In fact, he recalls going outside one day to find an elderly maid reviewing the home's exterior admiringly with his assistant. That said, here is one house that Paul Williams definitely did design. The plans I saw say it was built for a Ronald Richard, but are classified by the Williams Archive for its longtime owner, Michael Garris. It's another great example of that tropic modern style that in vogue, of which Williams was an adroit practitioner, as we can see from this interior shot.
Wow.
The house hit the market last year for the first time in 50 years, virtually preserved in amber. I'm really happy when I find houses like this that are unchanged for so long, and I'm amazed at how many I have found in Truesdale that are still lived in by the people who built them. Again, the architectural provenance of this home is unsure. It's credited to architect Wayne McAllister, but McAllister expert and author Chris Nichols thinks otherwise, pointing out that by the time this was built in 1957, McAllister was no longer doing residential work and was furthermore practicing in Washington, D.C. Whoever designed it, the house is such a strong statement, it's almost beside the point, though. Now owned by a prominent art collector, top architects Marmol Radziner were brought in to update and expand the house to create a stunning backdrop for his museum-quality art collection, which literally fills the house and grounds inside and out. And the scale is enormous. Each room is the size of an airport lobby. Even the gardens by Jay Griffith are works of art, unfolding in a series of architectural naturalistic moments. It can't have been easy being Frank Lloyd Wright Jr. He was a talented architect whose career, long eclipsed by that of his famous father, is just now being given proper assessment and appreciation. He designed the first two bandshells of the Hollywood Bowl and that Palos Verdes landmark, the Wayfarers Chapel, two works upon which another architect might have rested his laurels. Lloyd, had, as he was known, had worked with his father on his LA projects and stayed here after Wright Sr. moved on. He designed two houses in Truesdale within a block of each other. I feel this is the better of the two, and its exuberantly angled and gilt-edged geometry was for a long time one of Truesdale's best-kept secrets. To say it's been insensitively updated is to state the obvious. The good news is nothing's been done that really can't be undone. And happily, a lot of the original elements remain, like the fanciful powder room at Wright. Sometimes I give archetype equal weight to architecture, such is the case with this house, which contains nearly every signature element of its place and time. The animated roof line, the broad circular driveway, the display case carport, the blank mysterious front decorated with a multitude of finishes, all on a decidedly powerful horizontal. The carport remains something of a local landmark, at least to me, as does the 1977 vintage Cadillac Seville shelters, because every time I've driven by this house in the last 30 years, that car has always been right there. For his own trophy home, Paul Truesdale presumably had a delicate matter on his hands. Architect friends and associates of long standing, such as Ed Fickett, Quincy Jones, or Alan Seipel, might have each thought they'd be the natural nominee to design the home of the man whose name was on the subdivision. Whatever the motivation, the selection of Hollywood Regency godfather John Elgin Wolfe was an unusual choice, chiefly his disposition against modernity in what was a very modern development. The choice of Wolfe probably had a lot to do with satisfying wife Jean Truesdale's wishes for an elegant lifestyle and formal entertaining for which the couple came to be known. The living room, as decorated by its prior owner, interior designer Donna Livingston, who really upped the glamour ante inside and out in this house. And when I visited her, I kept stopping to caress the finishes. From the 5-layer drapes to the Venetian plaster walls to the shagreen floor of the powder room, I just couldn't stop. This reminds me, photographer Tim Street Porter tells the hilarious story of visiting the home when Jean Truesdale was still in residence. Tim recalls the floors were so highly waxed. Oh, sorry, does that not work? Do I have to go back?
Page 1.
No. We're going to keep going, right?
Yes.
Because this is funny.
Very good.
Tim Street Porter tells the hilarious story of visiting the home when Jean Truesdale was still in residence. Tim recalls the floors were so highly waxed and polished that her poodle had learned the trick of walking backwards on the parquet. Until he got to the carpeted areas and then he'd turn around. Because he couldn't get a grip on the wood. I like to think that's the long-suffering puppy for whom Charlotte Drive was named. This one's a sentimental favorite. And we're going to go through all of these very, very quickly. I have so much to talk about with every house, and half the houses aren't even in this presentation. It's just a taste, just an appetizer. This is, to me, where this book project really all began. The Groucho Marx house by Wallace Neff. When I was about 18, I found this photo and the floor plan of the house in a book that Neff had self-published, along with most of his more romantic work. Of course I knew this house. It has always been one of Truesdale's most famous. But this was the first time I ever saw the name of an A-list architect connected with a Truesdale house. That was truly the genesis of what brought me here today. For all his renown with formalistic traditional architecture, Neff's later modern houses are quite good, often incorporating sinuous curves and angles. The house had survived in much the same form, passing through the hands of three families till 2008, when it underwent a radical makeover. So little of the original was left that when it was marketed, while it was marketed as the Groucho Marx estate, it wasn't at all the house he had lived in, so much as maybe the roof he'd lived under. I go on at length in the book, but here's a simple before and after comparison. At top, Groucho and Eden Marx survey the pool terrace in 1958, shortly after moving in. And on the bottom, the same view as it looks today. Another angle, the pool terrace in 1960 at the top, and 2008 on the bottom. Lundberg, Armay, and Davis are better known for their kooky coffee shops like Pan's, Norm's, and Johnny's at Fairfax and Wilshire than for their residential work. But here we see how they approach a modern house, actually very successfully. Built for Travelodge founder Phil Gershon and his wife, realtor Bernice, everything I touch turns to sold, Gershon. It's a casual but refined ranch-style affair with some stunning decorative flourishes, like that oval Roman tiled tub. Hal Levitt designed several of Truesdale's most distinctive and most admired houses. This photo by Julia Schulman captures that spirit completely down to the jazzy jag in the driveway. This photo actually also shows one of the Hal's signature devices. Those are not the front doors that you're looking at. They actually are portals leading into this interior courtyard, and then you get to the front door. He did that all the time. Wonderful. You know, one of the happiest results of this book has been getting to know the work of Harold Levitt. As I said before, I was amazed to find that he designed so many of the houses I admired, not only in Truesdale, but all over town. So in the course of my research, imagine my delight to connect with Hal's succeeding partner, Kyle Moss, who is here today, and to be able to look through the archive. It eventually led to my becoming director with Kyle of the Harold Levitt Professional Archive, which we are working together to place with an academic institution. And to say it's an honor is an understatement. Little remembered today, architect George McLean's vernacular employed elements that seemed to go backwards in time, away from the space-age weightlessness that was the hallmark of mid-century modern. McLean's designs, though modern, were also in their way medieval, fortress-like, as we see in this house for automotive import pioneer Maximilian Hoffman. Max Hoffman was no stranger to architectural bravura. Perhaps best known in architecture history circles as the man who commissioned Frank Lloyd Wright for a house on Long Island in 1953, for which Wright designed the famous rug pattern seen here. Hoffman is also the distinction of being client to Wright's other New York City built work, the Mercedes-Benz showroom at Park Avenue and 56th Street, built as a mini Guggenheim, complete with a spiral ramp to display the cars. As the sole importer of German automobiles into the United States after World War II, and that was a hard sell, Hoffman provoked Volkswagen, Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, and especially BMW, for whom he was chief U.S. importer until 1975. Oh, turn the page. You can say this house shares some similarities to the Wright design in the use of stone pylons and broad overhanging eaves, but in California, the architect allows some naturalistic flights of fancy to loosen things up. Under that ponderously heavy-looking porte-cochere, there's this incredibly delicate entrance. Now, here's something I came to notice. Some of the most striking homes in Truesdale don't really look like homes at all. They could be said to more closely resemble art museums, banks, or country clubs. Such is the case with this house, another stunner by Hal Levitt, for plumbing supply magnate Isidore Familian, which practically defines patrician modernism of a certain era. Something else I noticed, Truesdale attracted a lot of builders like Familian and Nathan Chappell, Montgomery Fisher, and others. It really said something that people who could build anywhere chose to build in Trousdale Estates. The black and white photo of the original kitchen is by Julius Schulman. Sadly, the wondrous biomorphic island and skylight were phased out in a later renovation. A detail of the original floor plan shows the oval dining room is what's behind that sculpture screen at the front of the house. We've seen this house before. The house, designed by William Sutherland Beckett, was built for the president of the Penwald Custom Construction Company, and later was the home of banking executive Barry Taper. I was glad to find it was in Beverly Hills because in the Pier Luigi Serino book on Julius Schulman, they identified it as being in Fresno. I was even happier to have been contacted by the new owner and the designer who provided some great shots of the house looking very smart indeed after its updating by designer Brock Payton last year. Wonderful. I have a bunch of wonderful shots of this house.
Beautiful.
I mentioned earlier the Trousdale Quintet, the 5 model homes that were constructed just before 1965. This is one of them. Designed by A. Quincy Jones, he was at the point in his career where he was taking the leap from middle-class Eichler land to the modern mansions that made up the rest of his residential career. The dramatic entrance would seem to be out of character for the man who bought the home, 5-star General Omar Bradley. Seems even less likely that Bradley would sell the house to the man who gave the world Donna Summer, producer Giorgio Moroder, who was responsible for its disco period. Really, if he hadn't given us Donna, some of us would never have forgiven him for what he did to this house. Luckily, it was bought 2 years ago by film director Harold Becker and his talented wife Susan, who are doing some wonderful things with it. A few doors down, another model is being planned, this by the lesser-known architect Rex Lottery. I'm showing here 2 of the alternate options he designed for the site, both very Frank Lloyd Wrightian, one Usonian on the left, one hemicycle on the right. And the actual built plan is also very Wrightian. The inset photo show the house as it appears today. But it's fun seeing the alternatives that he proposed for the site. One of the most fun I've had with Truesdale is that many of the houses now have had several lives. This gorgeous and famous house, another of the models by Rex Lottery, is one of them. It's well known as the former home of Tonight Show producer Fred de Cordova and his socialite wife Janet, and was an epicenter of Truesdale society for many, many years. Excuse me. If you haven't figured out, I'm battling a little cold. The house is now on its next life as the home of fashion photographer and director Matthew Ralston and his partner Ted Russell, who have appointed it exquisitely and continued its tradition as a social hub. These photos show the house as it appeared before the de Cordovas bought it and in a recent issue of Vanity Fair. And I can't wait to photograph the house as Matthew and Ted have done it for the book. Certainly, one of the most storied homes in Truesdale is the West Coast home to Elvis Presley and his wife, Priscilla. In fact, it was to this address that the couple moved when they married in 1966, and the one to which Elvis returned following their divorce. The house had been built a few years before for businessman Robert Calhoun, about whom little is known. The pseudo-Regency style in which it was designed was the height of elegance among the nouveau riche of the day. Some things never change, or they seem not to anyway. The entrance hall, this photograph was taken in 1965, and it looks nearly identical today. And the man gate, where hundreds of fans have scribbled messages, has respectfully never been painted over. The Rose House was designed by architects Buff, Straub, and Hensman in 1963 for Helen Rose, the Oscar-winning MGM's costume designer, also beloved in Hollywood for her design of Grace Kelly's famous wedding dress. In 1999, interior designer Carol Cattleman acquired the home and selected the firm of Marmol Radziner to undertake an updating. It's a credit to her unfailing eye that this house has been cited time and time again as the ultimate Truesdale icon, inspiring designers, architects, and artists alike. The blank facade of the main entry only hints at the patrician pavilion to be found behind. The view unfolds through transparent glass walls, giving onto terrazzo paved pool terraces and looking out over the city beyond. Some before pictures show just how brown the house was when Carol found it. Today it's a pristine vitrine for art and light and beauty. I have never visited the house with anyone who did not want to move right in. Frank Carter is not a well-known name in architectural circles in Los Angeles, and for 40 years the formidable front of this house kept its design secrets hidden from all except those invited inside. While it was in very worn shape in 2006 when he bought it, the new owner, Eric Kranzler, recognized its potential immediately, having watched friends and clients David Arquette and Jennifer Aniston polish the architectural gems they'd obtained nearby. His choice of gifted designer Brad Dunning to assist in reinterpreting the home's flow and organization was an undeniable part of the stunning success we see today. While the house looks like as though it was meticulously restored, in fact, nearly every room configuration and finish is new, down to the interior courtyard, which before was just a slab of bare concrete. Part of what makes Trousdale Estates so over the top was its embodiment of what it felt like to be wealthy in an optimistic era, and an excitement captured by some young architects just starting out at the time. One of them, Robert L. Earl, in cooperation with builder Peter Scully, produced some exceptionally swank homes there, and nowhere was this freeform excitement and experimentation more evident than in his floor plans. Often hidden behind strict facades, his use of swoops and arcs and circles were not only signature elements of their day, they've become prized design features of the present as well. When this vintage, 1962 vintage home came on the market last year, it was intact, but for a minor addition. Quarter moon pink terrazzo tubs, round bedrooms, and those brass and glass screens that were works of art all by themselves. It was a time capsule I never wanted to leave, just my favorite house of the year. And I wasn't the only one. It was sold less than 3 weeks after being on the MLS. Well, let's get back to serious architecture. This house by A. Quincy Jones, that Jones expert and biographer and architect Corey Buckner restored for her clients Courtney Cox and David Arquette, is one of the architectural treasures of Trousdale Estates. In fact, I told the couple I'd been in love with their house since they'd been in high school. The pool is legendary. I think the landscape design might have been Garrett Egbo. Word on the street is, with an impending divorce, this house will soon hit the market, priced in the $20 million neighborhood. And as they say, that's a nice neighborhood. The pool, again, featured in a 1974 edition of Architectural Digest. This is a very short section. Welcome back to the Hal Levitt Show. Aluminum heir Homer Harvey had been expected by his father, Arthur, who invented the pop-top soft drink can, the aluminum soft drink can, to succeed him as occupant of his John Lavender designed house in Los Feliz, the one now owned by Mitch Glazer and Kelly Lynch. But the younger Harvey wanted something else for his wife and daughters, and admittedly, every Lavender house is a special fit. After deciding on Truesdale, the Harveys brought Hal Levitt in to design what has arguably become his best-known residence. Departing from his museum cool palace of whites and blacks of the 50s and 60s, Levitt delivered a dramatic, lodge-like house of stone and wood. The towering entrance portico and the open-air entertaining lanai that look so very modern are in fact both original to the 1972 house. Of course, the home is probably now the most famous in Truesdale because of its occupancy and restoral by Jennifer Aniston, with a little help from her designer Stephen Shadley. The Friends star bought it for $13 million in 2007. People thought she was crazy. Put about $9 million into the design. People thought she was crazy. Hoisted it on the market for $42 million a year ago. People thought she was crazy. But she sold it the last year for $35.5 million. So who's crazy? Honestly, the scale of the house's public spaces is nearly impossible to capture in photos. I mean, we've seen 2 attempts, and you just can't capture it. It's too big. Of course, it's because of Jen's high profile that helped shine the spotlight back on Hal's architecture, so I am doubly grateful to her. Here's a detailed shot of the house on Carlo Ridge by Jacob Track. This has a lot of the Truesdale hallmarks: the curving rock wall, the terrazzo floors, double door entry, an integrated water feature. Only back then we called it a fountain. architect Edward Fickett was close friends and work associates with Paul Truesdale. Together, Fickett had designed and Truesdale built tens of thousands of houses. He's an undersung master who has been in the news lately a lot on the preservation front. He was wildly prolific and creative, and I'm glad he's finally getting the notice he deserves. One of his least known buildings, however, is the gracious home he designed for himself on Upper Loma Vista in 1973. It has a double-height living room and a sunken tennis court, another frequent Fickett feature. This photograph is of the house as it looks today after a remodel by its current owner, Michael Rosen. Another shot of the refreshed entrance with the classic stepping stones over water approach to the front door. These two photos were taken by Josh Hadid, who is a young man who's a photographer, who I'm glad to be working with on shooting the new houses for the book. For its 50th anniversary issue in 1970, Architectural Digest featured this contemporary hillside home in Trousdale Estates. The next time we see the pool, it's in this very smart redesign by Scott Unger in 2009. The master bedroom in 1970, swanky.
Wow.
And the master bath today. I love this before and after stuff. Don't you?
Yes.
At one point in the 1980s, the Truesdale CC&Rs, limiting building heights and other restrictions, lapsed, and residents took advantage to build up, out, and in some cases under their houses to expand their living and entertaining spaces. You can see here the house in the middle has built out under the entire pool terrace. And I have to say, this does have the advantage of not blocking anyone's views from above. That's what led to the conditions under which this massive three-story house could have been built. One of the cul-de-sacs off Upper Carla Ridge. However, the CC&Rs being reinstated in the 1990s with a vengeance, some say, is pretty sure nothing like this will be permitted again anytime soon. The house has been referred to as Lavender-esque, probably because of the wood, stone, and soaring space. Perfect as the bachelor pad it became for later owners Matthew Perry, followed by producer Oren Colas. If there was a turning point in Truesdale's return to glamour, it can probably be traced to the 4 Days in LA ad campaign for Johnny Versace, which premiered in 2000. Photographer, art director Stephen Mizell filled the former Charles Scurra's house, designed by Hal Levitt in 1956, with every conceivable luxury, demonstrating that its style was as current as ever. In fact, Stephen found he liked the Truesdale vibe so much, he bought a George McLean house up the street and brought in Marmal Radziner to gussy it up for him. And when Truesdale began to come back in 2000 or in the 2000s, I kept waiting for somebody to write the book. And finally, 3 years ago, when no one had done it, I said, okay, I'll do it. And it's been an amazing ride ever since. Now, soon after, the house was bought and redecorated by Kelly Wursler, who devoted an entire book to her work on this house. I think she fought the architecture a little too much, but you can't deny the result is stunning. The dining room as Kelly did it, and the same rooms today. The current owners have pared everything back and are content to let the architecture do all the talking. Architectural designer Steve Herman has made an industry updating Truesdale houses. To fully appreciate the effect of his latest and greatest, I wanted to show you how it looked before and after. The former Burt Reynolds residence has been transformed into a state-of-the-art showplace. It was recently snapped up by bridal fashion czarina Vera Wang, who popped the question and said, I do. I never get tired of a scimitar-shaped roofline echoed in the shape of the pool. This, to me, is what Truesdale is all about. It's the residence of celebrity hairstylist Sally Hirschberger, with interiors, again, wonderfully sculpted by Carol Kettleman, who once again has created a pristine and sculptural sequence of spaces. Surprise, here's Hal Levitt again. Even though this house was designed in 1964 for film director Ross Hunter, it firmly belongs in the today category. The defining architectural device of the house is the trellis superstructure, beginning at the carport and extending all the way through the house and out over the pool. It's a stunning tour de force and carries a stunning price tag. It was recently sold for $15.5 million without ever hitting the open market. Don't worry about the new owner, though. He can afford anything he wants, as long as it has that certain X factor. And we've seen here in this presentation a number of two-story, tri-level homes Truesdale is mostly one-story homes, but there were, in some cases, about 24 or so original two-story homes throughout the hills, tucked away, hard to see. Most of the modern construction we've seen, I admit, are remodels. Whole new structures, noteworthy ones anyway, are relatively rare in Truesdale. But this new house by Marmal Radziner is a ground-up construction that pulses with pure architecture in every line and plane. I can't say enough great things about this house, nor Leo and Ron for that matter, who have done so much incredible work in Truesdale and have been so generous to me. This house is an entirely fitting grand finale for the book. Now, here is the sad part of the show, the equivalent of the Academy Award memorial reel, where they can honor everyone who died the year before. One of the first houses I saw fall in Truesdale, this classic mid-century with a madly Mondrian-esque front by William Sutherland Beckett, stood for less than 20 years before being razed in 1977 to make way for a thoroughly mundane house by Ed Fickett. Tell me if this were standing today, it wouldn't be one of the landmarks of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And these are Julia Schulman photos again, by the way, the last two. Few celebrities figure larger in the legend of Trousdale Estates than Frank Sinatra. Trouble is, the home he commissioned from architect Paul Williams wasn't in Truesdale. It was on Beaumont Drive. For whatever reason, the architect and the publicity of the time placed it in Trousdale Estates, and so it became part and parcel of the mystique. The home itself tells a fascinating story in any case. Following his divorce from Ava Gardner, Frank asked Paul Williams to design him the swinginest bachelor pad imaginable, with all the push-button gadgetry that was possible in Sputnik-era 1957. The house was largely built without Sinatra's on-site supervision. He was off making films and performing at the time. His daughter Tina told me when the first time he even saw the home finished was when he arrived to televise an Edward R. Murrow TV special. Improvising and ad-libbing off the cuff, Old Blue Eyes provided a hilarious house tour of the home he'd never seen, even opening a closet full of wrapped Christmas gifts for children they weren't supposed to know about on national television. Here's the kicker, though. This house astonishingly survived pretty much unchanged and intact until as recently as 2006, when it was torn down for yet another Tuscan cartoon. I was really shocked and depressed when this one came down last year. It was my favorite house in Truesdale. Built in 1961 with interiors by Arthur Elrod for Eugene Klein, the founder of Host International, the owner of the San Diego Chargers. Remember when Host International was in every airport in America? The enormous crab-shaped house on Truesdale Place looked like something a James Bond villain would live in. But it was built before there were James Bond movie villains. The house was sold in 2010 to Oakley Eyewear founder Jim Jannard for a little under $20 million in cash. He was heard saying he didn't spend that much to live like anyone else, and soon after raised the house, as though this place is like anything else. Well, sources tell me that the new structure will surpass the drama of this one, and time will tell. Mies van der Rohe's Barcelona Pavilion was one of the greatest ghost buildings of the 20th century. It was dismantled shortly after it was built in 1929, and for the next 60 years, only a handful of profoundly influential photographs were all it remained. That may explain the powerful hold it had on architects of a certain era to try and resurrect its spaces and effects time after time after time after time. Most attempts fell short, and this one, I think, was moderately successful. The house was vast and horizontal, the pool nearly 100 feet long. I even loved the gold anodized window frames myself. A few years ago, I was disheartened to see the fences and the tarps go up, plantings ripped out, you know the drill. Next time I saw the house, it was being marketed as the House of O. My reaction was to call it the House of Oh My God. And somebody bought it, but I guess that they don't like it either because it's being remodeled again. I can't wait to see what comes out this time. The Joseph Baber House by Richard Dorman, with its folded plate roof, has always been an architectural highlight on Lower Loma Vista. In recent years, however, it's had a run of very bad luck. Owners starting construction, running out of money. I think one walked away from it. With no kitchen and bathrooms, it couldn't even find a buyer for the longest time and has continued to degrade. I can't even show you the pictures of how it looks today. Now, it apparently was sold a few months ago, but I'm not holding out hope that it will be restored. The Cy Ramo house. Now, Cy was the R in TRW. This was a beauty. Built in 1958, it was truly above it all. 8,700 square feet of museum quality manor. And you can see here how it outsizes even outsizes its not insubstantial neighbors. DreamWorks animation head Jeffrey Katzenberg bought the house, the property, for $35 million in December 2009. It was the highest priced residential real estate transaction of the year in Los Angeles that year. Did I say Los Angeles 6 times in that sentence? Soon after, the house, as we see it here, was torn down to make way for a newer, larger house designed by Howard Bakken, formerly of the San Francisco powerhouse firm Bakken, Aragoni Ross. An interesting choice for an LA architect or LA project. While I lament the loss of the house, from the renderings I've seen, the replacement promises to be very high quality architectural result and a credit to the Trousdale Estates pantheon. On that note, it's great to be able to report that a preservation ordinance was adopted last week by the Beverly Hills City Council. There will be longer review periods, a committee to make nominations for landmarking status. There's even Mills Act tax credits to be made available. And we'll see how that plays out. It's true that we've lost so much, but some things will remain, and you'll be glad to know this is one of them. The house you saw in the first clip, the Valley of the Dolls clip, it is entirely unchanged and still exists today, just like this. I met Brett Parsons when I wrote him a fan letter after reading his book, Cold Court Home. We met and became great friends. If Jeff Hyland has been the godfather of his project, Brett's been the fairy godfather. The first thing he advised me to do was to set up a website where people could find out about the book, where they could vet me, where designers and architects, people I wanted to interview, could check out to see I was legitimate. To call the idea a success is completely inadequate. Nearly every day I get emails and inquiries from around the world expressing interest. Many Truesdale residents have found their way to me, providing incredible material and some great stories. The same can absolutely be said for Facebook. Over the Top has built a vast and growing following. Another way for people to connect with me, and it's been an essential tool for gathering material, building interest, and we have a lot of fun. And that's our preview. This is the first time anywhere has seen this. This is the first time anywhere this material has been presented publicly. I'm sure the first thing you all want to know is where you can buy the book. And here's the thing: it's not done yet. We're still editing, getting clearances, photographing several of the houses anew. It'll be months before the book is available. I'm afraid I don't have a publication date to give you at this time. I do hope in the meantime you found this little look fun and informative, because it really is just the tip of the iceberg. There will be so much more to show when it's done. I want to thank you all for coming. Again, I want to thank Brett Parsons, founder and director of Arrow Architectural, and John Arrow, CEO and founder of the John Arrow Group, for having me. And I hope to see you all at a book signing later this year.